Good morning. I'm Maurice Crespi, co-founder of Schindler's Attorneys. That would be Schindler's Attorneys being the co-founder of COBRA. Welcome everybody today. We've got an exciting webinar. We're dealing with insurance and insurance in the context of the events of the last 10 days. Lots of questions have been asked. There's a lot that's been said. There are a lot of views that have been expressed in relation to the position of insurance companies, the position of the insured. Is there enough money to pay out the claims? Will the claims be honored? We'll talk to the various policies and the law in relation to claims in these circumstances. We have a panel today of experts in the industry. I'll start with Andrew. Andrew is an associate partner at IQ Business. IQ Business is one of the founding partners of COBRA. He has 20 years experience in the investment and insurance space throughout sub-Saharan Africa. We then have neil.sanford, who is an experienced solutions advisor with close to 20 years in the insurance industry. He brings along a highly skilled knowledge portfolio that includes enterprise risk management, new business procurement, employment practice liability, and commercial insurance. He is currently the new business development executive at Aon. We then have Rajesh. Rajesh is a business rescue practitioner and restructuring expert at Tryford Consulting. Rajesh has extensive experience in transforming distressed organizations into profitable enterprises, as is evidenced by his successful reorganization of the Walter Sisulu University, the AXA and Sandparks businesses most recently. We also have Ryan. Ryan Cameron is a principal at US Plus. His experience and exposure in commercial and corporate law has made Ryan an asset at US Plus for the last 5 years. US Plus is a development finance organization at heart, enabled by cloud-based technology. It specializes in the provision of flexible working capital solutions for SME partners in over 40 industries throughout South Africa. So thanks, guys. Thank you very much for being here today. I think we'll kick off possibly with Neil. Neil, welcome today. Thanks so much for being here. If you just give us a general broad outline in relation to the claim environment in circumstances such as the present. We've all heard about Sasria, and if you can just maybe take us through the state of play in the context of the looting and the violence that has taken place. Neil?
Well, Sasria is fairly unique in the insurance world. It only exists in South Africa. It goes back to the riots in '76 and is a state-owned entity. And basically, a standard global policy would normally include the cover of riot and strike, but because we have a state insurance policy in South Africa, Sasria, you have to buy that cover separately via Sasria. You have to request it, and it has to follow the main body of the policy. As regards claims over the recent period, most insurers have set up dedicated call centers to assist with quantifying the claims, advising what information is needed to submit a claim to Sasria, who ultimately pay the claim. So such documentation as photographs, video evidence, most importantly, a police report number, copy policy documents, and a quantum of loss, exactly how much stock did you insure, how much has been damaged or stolen. And all this information needs to be collated and submitted via your broker to your insurer. and depending on the size of the loss, depending on the size of the loss, at the moment, small claims up to 50,000 will be paid pretty quickly. Claims up to 1 million, most brokers have been given authority from SASRIA to adjust those claims on behalf of SASRIA. Anything above 1 million, SASRIA wants to involve a loss assessor to quantify the risk. The good news is that insurers are trying to settle these amounts as soon as possible. I saw a mail this morning from one insurer saying that they intended to settle within 3 weeks, which is pretty quick. So there is an industry thought that these claims need to be settled quickly, and they're endeavouring to up the volume of people in the claims departments to administer and settle as soon as possible.
Is there any idea as yet as to the extent of the damage, whether there will be sufficient money in the kitty to cover the claims?
Well, the estimates have quadrupled since I saw the MD of SASRIA on the news a few nights ago saying we will pay claims and we're estimating 2.5 to 7 billion. Now we're seeing estimates upwards of 15 to 30 billion. SASRIA, as any insurer does, will retain a certain percentage of a claim, and above that amount, they will buy reinsurance to offset the cost of the loss. SASRIA have made it public that they use quality reinsurers, but haven't said whom they are and how much reinsurance they've bought. SASRIA is a state-owned entity, so if there is a shortfall, in theory, the state should step in.
I see there's a question. Thanks for that, Neil. I'll direct this to you. Hi, has government made available any fund aid for SMEs regarding loss of income? According to the BCA, we are still expecting to pay employees. I don't know if that's directed to a particular person. I'm aware of the funds, but I don't know if there's any further funding that has been made available. Has anybody got any insight into that? Not. Andrew, Aon, what's happening behind the scenes? What are the insurance companies saying?
At the moment, like Neil says, all the insurance companies are coming to the party to assist with the administration of the claims. And that will obviously speed up the initial claim submission and processing of a number of claims. I think the real issue is nobody really knows the quantity or the amount of damages that have been incurred now, or what the damages incurred will be in loss of income. You sort of referred to that just now around salaries. But a lot of these customers will have policies that cover them for business interruption. The same issues that we faced with COVID, we will face again now, probably even more severe than we did with the COVID side of things. And businesses can be covered for up to 24 months for loss of interruption, business interruption cover. So, making guesses as to what the actual current damages are, that's fine, but we don't know, and it's difficult to quantify how long it will take some businesses to get back into full operations. And as long as longer that takes, the greater the claims become. So that, for me, the longer tail of all of this will take a while to sort out. And I don't know where this will all end up. Is it going to end up as another SOE that has to go to the government for a handout a la SAA or ESCOM or anybody like that? We hope not. But like I say, just quantifying actual damages from the looting is one element, but the other element is the longer tail. because your Checkers, your Pick and Pay, the big groupings, they will quite quickly get back into operation. They're already in the press saying they're back in operation because they have the cash, the reserves, everything to replace, fix everything, get it all done, and then claim from their insurer. The other businesses need the money up front before they can actually get back into operation. And the longer it takes them to get the cash to get back into operation, the longer the business interruption claim tail goes. And it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy in that sense.
So all types of claims are covered by a SASRA, business interruption, the actual damage. It's really the nature of the event that determines whether they cover the loss. Am I right on that?
It depends. It's like any other insurance policy. Your basic policy is covering you for actual losses, damages incurred. If you take out the business interruption extension, then you are covered. It's not the standard one, but like most commercial policies, you can take out various sections according to your needs. So it would depend on that particular element. And I think one other thing we shouldn't forget is there is a large sector of our population and businesses that are not covered by insurance of any kind. So when you talk about the government providing a safety net, that's the element I think that should concern us more as well than just the tail of the insured. What about the businesses that didn't have insurance?
Well, I guess that's when government would step in. You mentioned that government, you hope the government won't step in. I mean, that's really, I think at a certain point they'd have to step in. We hope that they have sufficient money so they wouldn't have to step in, but certainly I think when it comes to the business owners, it's important for them that they recover the loss. But I think the point to be made is, what about the smaller guys, the guys who won't be covered? I mean, they really left high and dry. No, thanks for that. I just want to mention to the audience, please ask questions. That's the idea today. To engage, that's the nature of webinar. So please post your questions on the Q&A and we'll get the panelists to answer them. Ryan, you have a legal background. Can you give us your 2 cents worth, please?
Thanks very much for that, Maurice. I do have a legal background. I have since left the practice as a practicing attorney, and I've been involved in the developmental finance space for the last 6 years. It was a tough week it's a tough 2-week period to be a South African. On one hand, you've got this utter devastation, and on the other hand, you've got, this real camaraderie when you're seeing people stand up to defend their property, to defend against the lawlessness. And I'm really I'm honored to form part of this panel. Obviously, I'll leave the insurance and the SASRIA stuff to the experts like Andrew, and my approach will be strictly a where to from now. We've got 2 choices, and specifically the people in KZN have 2 choices. We can give up against all the hardships we're facing, or we can fight on. And maybe it's my DNA, maybe it's the genetic makeup of the business, but we form part of the latter camp, and hopefully we can be part of the solution. We focus on funding small to medium-sized businesses, and I reached out to Bob and the other members of COBRA last year during the stand they took through COBRA to try and be part of creating some change and making South Africa a little bit better, helping 1 business, 2 businesses at a time, as much as we can, really.
Yeah. Neil, do you envisage, has there been talk of any claims not being paid?
There hasn't been talk of it. SASRIA, like most insurers, in their press releases are saying a valid claim. So it all depends if you've got the correct cover for what you're claiming for and the correct sum insured.
Certainly. Rajesh is our business rescue practitioner. As most of you know, I am an attorney. I specialize in commercial law, and aspects of commercial law is business rescue law. I've been practicing in business rescue since 2011. In fact, the first SCA Supreme Court of Appeal case that made it to the Supreme Court of Appeal was mine. Now, importantly, when it comes to business rescue and what Rajesh does, the insurance component is a very, very important factor when it comes to the question of rescue. If there is a claim and you need the moratorium, that's what business rescue is about. You have the benefit of the moratorium. You enter into a resolution, the board resolves to go into business rescue, and you have the moratorium, which basically suspends all claims. Rajesh, what are your views? I mean, you've encountered businesses in distress as a result of circumstances like this. How have you experienced the insurance companies as a business rescue practitioner? They've been difficult. What is the lay of the land? What can people expect?
Okay. Look, certainly, I think that the circumstances leading up to where we are, if one could call it, it is business unusual. Okay. Normally, you'd work in a stable economic environment, and businesses may get into trouble for one reason or the other, and then business rescue proceedings is an option that they may wish to consider. Here we have a reverse situation whereby businesses found themselves under attack, loss of assets, destruction, loss of stock, etc. And generally speaking, under these circumstances, if I can put it crudely, it's really a novel situation, okay? Because the scale of looting and destruction is really unprecedented in recent years. So it'll be very interesting to see how the insurance companies respond to the claims from their clients. And of course, SASRIA is going to be a major component of that, which is a very specialized policy to cover these kinds of events. However, I do suspect that SASRIA itself is going to be largely overwhelmed with the claims coming through and the financial quantums of those claims. But responding to the clients in a time-efficient manner is going to be critical to get these businesses back into play and up and running again. Picking up from where Ryan was, on the developmental finance side, of course, the other complication is that it's an issue around infrastructure and the built environment, because if your shopping center is burnt or destroyed, getting paid out your claims, etc., will help to some extent, but that doesn't get you into the game of play, and that's another huge, serious impediment, because obviously loss of income, insurance, etc., will cover you for a certain period of time. But as we all know, some of these shopping centers were seriously damaged and may have to be built from the ground up. Okay, what's going to happen to those businesses? Now, in those cases, quite frankly, opting for business rescue is really going to have marginal impact to give you some relief, purely because, with the business rescue scenario, you effectively want to continue trading on a day-to-day basis. So business owners may have to then reconsider their position and look at alternative ways of creating revenue for their businesses. In other words, can they engineer the business towards an online model as opposed to a bricks and mortar model, whilst their premises are being rebuilt, etc. So these are kind of things that business owners would have to start to apply their mind to. Alternatively, through the business rescue proceedings, can we effectively then suspend the lease agreements with landlords and giving the client an opportunity to relocate to another venue close by for them to start to trade again until their premises are up and running. In other words, suspending the lease agreement will mean that, one would need to negotiate the non-payment of rental for that period of time. So these are some of the remedies that are available and would be available to the entrepreneur out there.
Rajesh, Andrew mentioned business interruption lasting as long as 24 months. Business rescue is designed to be a quick and speedy remedy. How do you reconcile that?
Okay, so basically when you file for business rescue, you got CIPC has 5 days to respond. And then after that, you've got 25 days to develop the rescue plan. So clearly, what I'm trying to say is that there might be a disconnect given the circumstances that led to the business wanting to be in business rescue. It's not that they traded badly and they found themselves in a cash flow challenge. They find themselves in this position for reasons beyond their control, which is to say, the looting, the destruction, the destroying of premises, and now, what do they do? So business rescue may not be the appropriate intervention if the timeline to get back into business is going to be very protracted due to destruction of infrastructure. But if it's not the case, and they can get into business quite quickly, then business rescue is definitely an option.
What has your experience been with insurance companies and honoring claims? I mean, these are unique situations, but I mean, when it comes to the timing is key here, as you say. If they drag their feet, it'll take too long. Yeah. So what's your experience been? I mean, are they sensitive to the fact that these payouts have to take place post haste?
I think I'll answer it in two components: SASRIA and then other. In terms of the other, I think that the insurance companies are quite responsive and they really try to help the client as quickly as possible, subject to the loss adjustment exercise that would need to be done. In terms of SASRIA, I think SASRIA finds itself in an unprecedented situation of having billions of rands claimed against it. And that kind of money may not be accessible to them as an insurer, albeit it be a state insurance. So there might have to be some relief coming from the national fiscus towards SASRIA to honor those claims.
Ryan, over to you. Just when it comes to finance, we've now just heard from Rajesh that there are these delays, as Andrew mentioned, and conceivably businesses may actually not be able to cope, and conceivably business rescue may not be right. If I'm a business owner today and I need money, I wake up, what do I do? What should I do? So I've woken up today to this real shocker of a reality. Where to from here? What would you recommend?
So it's a very difficult question to give you a concise answer to. The answer depends a lot on a lot of the factors that Rajesh touched on. The one thing that I would urge is, and I know it sounds really silly, but slow things down, think through things clearly, get in touch with your bankers who should throughout this pandemic have or alternate funders like we are. Get in contact with them, make comms, open lines of communication, get in touch with your insurers and prioritize. In the wake of the devastation, there's so much that a business owner is going to have to do, from checking on staff to checking on stock levels to touching base with insurance companies. One foot in front of the other. Obviously, I come from. I'm a little bit biased in my thought process because I deal with small to medium-sized businesses on a daily basis, and cash flow and cash flow management and prioritization on that in these times is even more important. You saw how all the big listed businesses throughout the pandemic spent an inordinate amount of time of collecting money, building up cash reserves to build up a buffer to get through this. I know that a lot of small to medium-sized businesses don't have that luxury, but there are organizations out there that can help. I know that SASRIA is probably going to be overwhelmed and there's probably going to be a delay. I know the president has authorized some TERS payments for those industries that are affected. Those are probably also going to be delayed. But slowing things down, thinking through things clearly, and get in touch with those trusted advisors. You know, it's in times like this where you need to hold your head, because if you panic as the entrepreneur, you know, that's going to go right down through the spine of the business. You know, this is when you need to convey calm to your people, to your employees. You've got to communicate more than anything, especially with your funders who have a vested interest in you succeeding. I mean, I can go into each element in more depth, but that's how I would probably approach it based on my experience and what I do on a day-to-day basis.
Guys, I mean, have you been approached for funding as a result of the last 10 days?
Not specifically as a result of the last 10 days. We are putting out our feelers into the KZN area to see where we can help. We, fortunately or unfortunately, we were quite unaffected by the chaos down in KZN, bar for some logistics businesses that travel down the N3 there to reroute trucks and park trucks. We had guys having to take stuff off the railways because the railways weren't working. But certainly during COVID, you know, we found, my experience at least, was a lot of clients that ended up coming to us had received unsatisfactory help from the banks during this time frame. And that's not to say this is the bank's fault. I mean, I think it's a lot more complicated, and we can't really point blame to any one person. But certainly in the last 12 months, we've seen a massive uptick in inquiries for alternative sources of cash flow funding, specifically developmental funding to help South African businesses who employ South African people who pay taxes here. You know, and Maurice, the sad reality is that, you know, we're not going to be able to help everyone. And even with, you know, I think Neil touched on it, Andrew touched on it, Rajesh touched on it. There are going to be circumstances where businesses aren't going to be able to rebuild, that aren't going to be able to get over this, and some will fall by the wayside. You know, we certainly don't have the balance sheet to help each and every one, but we want to help those people that self-select themselves as leaders and try and help those people that are able to make a difference on the ground in their networks.
And how would guys do that? I mean, at COBRA, I guess you could go through the COBRA portal if funding is required. For anybody out there, there are funding partners who provide funding from an SMME level all the way up to big business. You've got your hand up, Andrew.
So I just wanted to clarify one thing concerning as far as insurance companies paying claims are concerned. I mean, if you take the name Sasria out of the equation for a moment and just look at the company as a small insurance company, which is what they are, in comparison to other insurance companies with a turnover of 2.5 billion, they're a small insurance company. They're smaller than Avbob, for instance, and a few other companies. So it really comes down to two factors. One is the actual capacity to administer, which is partly being solved by allowing the insurance companies to deal with most of those issues. The other issue is around money. Let's be honest here. If they liquidate everything they have, they could maybe raise 7 billion. But that's assuming their financials are correct. But when you have to liquidate assets in a fire sale, who knows what you're going to get for them. And how this works normally with an insurance company like this is once they realize that they're going to have cash flow problems, they start to delay claims payments. It's the only thing they can do. To protect themselves, they start delaying paying out of claims. So really what has to happen is that Sasria has to come to terms with the realities as soon as possible. They need to start to take all the claims estimates and already start to predict where they're going to end up. So they can start liquidating assets. And if they realize that's not going to work, they need to already turn to government and say, look, we're not going to be able to be honest, be transparent, and say we're not going to be able to meet all these claims. What is the backup plan for this? Rather than, you know, as Rajesh was just saying, like any business, leaving it until the nth moment when suddenly you're insolvent and throwing your hands up in the air and saying, oops, it's too late, because there's enormous consequences for the claimants.
I've got a question. Jan Skumman's asked, and I'll direct this at you, Andrew. Do claims against Sasria resort under OSTI in the event that there's a dispute about a claim?
So you just broke up there for a second, Maurice.
Do claims against Sasria resort under OSTI, OSTI, in the event that there's a dispute about a claim?
They would do, because at the end of the day, Sasria are licensed under the same rules as any other insurance company. So they have to operate under the same frameworks as everybody. But even under OSTI or any of these acts, it's all well and good. But if the insurer has no money, that's a problem. I don't think there's going to be a lot of disputes on claims, because Sasria has already gone public to say that they're not going to dispute that the events that occurred are an insured event. So I don't think there's going to be a huge ombudsman flood of claims. That I think is going to be a tiny part of this.
No, certainly. I'm going to move back to Rajesh. Rajesh, in the context of having a claim and you're financially distressed. Now, the Companies Act tells us at the moment you're financially distressed, you're obliged to put business rescue to the vote at a board level. Is that what you suggest? I mean, is that what does one do? You're financially, incidentally, for the audience, in terms of the Companies Act, you're financially distressed if it's reasonably foreseeable that you'll not be able to pay your debts as they fall due within the next ensuing 6 months. And the moment you're in financial distress, you're obliged to put business rescue to the vote. And if the board votes against business rescue, a notice has to go to creditors and to employees setting out why the vote went against business rescue. And often, I mentioned in webinars, one of the reasons that one can give is the fact that you're in the COBRA ecosystem, and we're assisting, and the idea is to keep you out of business rescue. That's what COBRA is about. Rajesh, any comments on that?
Thank you. Yes, look, I think, Maurice, we have to acknowledge and accept that we were on slippery slopes well before the mayhem started 10 days, 2 weeks ago, right? Meaning that we were in a COVID era with a very depressed economy. So businesses were trading, but they were also ailing, many of them, okay? But they always hoped that, look, now we go from lockdown level 4 to something different, and these things would start to stimulate the economy. Of course, there's no certainty in which direction those issues are going to go even now. However, on top of that, we had what we had some 2 weeks ago in terms of the looting and the rioting and the unrest. Now, quite frankly, despite trying to get funding through structures such as COBRA and others, really and truly, the biggest thing about business rescue is that it protects you against your creditors immediately, okay? And Ryan spoke about, slowing down, cooling down, and thinking things through. And you can't do it when you're under serious attack from your creditors, including the landlord, right? The landlord hypothec would apply, and you can be closed up overnight, really. But going into business rescue and managing yourself through that process is one of the options that should be considered by businesses, okay? Particularly when there is a clear plan of how you could possibly turn it around. Okay. And of course, the poor businessman is now faced against many mountains, not just one. So he needs that help. He needs that protection, okay? But business rescue is not for everybody, but it can be very effective when it's appropriate. It can be very effective, right? And it can give the business rescue practitioner to help the business trade out of it to a point where the picture becomes clearer, okay? Because business rescue has two distinct directions. One is to trade yourself out of it, and if you can't, and you have to go into a liquidation, then the creditors must be better off than they would have been if the company had not gone into business rescue. Okay, so these are very real things that we need to talk about and think about. But frankly, this is a macro position. It's a macro situation. We have to rebuild a country. We have to turn around a country, right? The businesses that operate within the ecosystem just happens to be part and parcel of that need that we now find ourselves in, okay? Because if we don't start by taking those interventions at a macroeconomic level, even when we support businesses through additional funding or through kinds of arrangements of restructuring or through the business rescue, we got to get them to start to trade in an environment, an economic environment that is far more buoyant than what it is. Okay, we need to get people to be buying and therefore businesses generating revenue, and through that revenue you start to trade yourself out of things. So the point I'm making, Maurice, is that we need to take a perspective that says our challenge is not simply at the micro level, dealing with the various businesses, but really and truly it has to start at the macro level.
No, 100%. I share your sentiments. We have another question. I think it's a legal question, and I think I'm the only legal person as a panelist here today. Let me read the question. It's by Leanne. What options are available to business people who are uninsured? Many people canceled their insurance policies to save costs during the COVID pandemic and have now been hit by a double whammy. Do they have any claims against the state or against any previous insurers within a window period from cancellation? So the answer to the latter portion of the question, are there any claims against previous insurers? The answer to that would be no, unless the policy says otherwise, and I've never come across a policy that allows for a window of opportunity. I don't think anybody would have seen that. On the question of whether one can sue government, that's an interesting one, and that's it's case specific. It depends on the circumstances of the event, and I think I'll illustrate it by detailing a case. It's not on all fours, but what happened, the case is called Yules versus the Minister of Police. It's about 40 years ago. Police beat up an individual, and they witnessed an individual being beaten up, and the police didn't do anything about it. So the police were held liable by the courts because they didn't do something about it. It was known as a delict or a tort as a result of an omission. The reason I'm mentioning that is the answer is yes, you can sue the state. So as an example, we've seen images of police not fulfilling the duties that they ought to, and in fact, there seems to have been some malfeasance. In those circumstances, there may very well be a claim. If, for instance, you have video footage of the police sitting around not doing anything, or even going further, actually participating in the looting, then you most certainly would have a claim. So there are circumstances, but very, very limited circumstances in which a claim would in fact arise. And if there are any questions that flow from that, please post them on, because it is an interesting topic. I was involved several years ago when there was there was rioting in the Boksburg area, and claims did arise there on that basis against government. Andrew, back to you. You mentioned the ombudsman. You say he's going to have a very, very limited role. What about when it comes to the question of quantum?
Yeah, the ombudsman historically, I think, is not really involved in issues of quantum, because at the end of the day, that's a factual thing. You can get a loss adjuster from one side, you can get one from the other, and you can thrash it out. The ombudsman is normally involved in interpretative matters concerning what is covered and what's not. So certain sectors of an insurance policy, an insurer may say, look, you're not covered, and the policyholder would dispute that I am covered. This is my interpretation. And these are the sort of matters that normally end up with the ombudsman. I think the quantum one is going to be an issue as well, because I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but of course, I would imagine that Sasria is going to use the average clauses like most insurers would do. So if you insured your stock or your building for R1 million and it's a total loss, they assess it as being worth R2 million, then they will only pay 50% of your claim because you are 50% uninsured. And those are the consequences of being uninsured. But as far as the loss adjusting goes, in that area, the biggest problem I actually see is how soon can you come to a conclusion? Because I don't think we have that many loss adjusters in this country that they can get to all these quite complex losses and claims, particularly speedily. When you've got a whole shopping center burnt down, it's going to take a lot of assessing. You're going to need engineers, quantity surveyors, everything to come up with an actual loss amount, because it's very complex.
Certainly. Neil, you've got your hand up. You want to jump in?
Yeah, what I was going to say that the Ombudsman has a limit of 800,000 on assessing disputes in claims. And also Sasria, you can only buy cover with Sasria up to 500 million. So it's really going to be the small, medium businesses, if they have an issue, it's going to be there rather than the large mass marts and the like. Because generally, when you've got an asset value in excess of 500 million, you can then get a dispensation from Sasria and buy cover above 500 million in the open market, either in South Africa or London. And so I think if there's going to be any issue with quantum, it's going to affect small, medium businesses rather than the larger corporates.
Neil, whilst I've got you on, rather, I'm curious. They're recovering all the looted items. Cops are going around knocking on doors, and those items are what happens to them? I mean, do those go back to do the insurers somehow share in the spoils? I mean, would it make sense that they go and that all those items are auctioned and that Sasria gets the sale proceeds? What happens? Have you any idea? I've been scratching my head wondering what happens to those goods, because surely the benefit should go to the insurers.
Normally what would happen if Sasria or the insurer is picking up the claim and there is salvage. So let's say we're talking about Game, who lost a couple of TV sets. Then in theory, if the police recovered the stolen goods and they were in a saleable article condition, then if the claim has been paid, the salvage goods become the property of Sasria or insurers, and they can dispose of them separately to recoup some of the cost of the claim.
I guess identifying who owns the goods is just going to be virtually impossible. So that'll be interesting.
It depends what it is. I mean, a TV with a serial number, you could probably identify the owner, but a lot of goods won't have serial numbers or barcodes.
Sure. Rajesh, back to you in the business rescue front. Strategies. Just give us some insight as to how you'd handle this. And I just want to point out this is very different to last year, because now we also have the landlords who are in as much trouble, and they have a significant loss, damage to their property. So it's almost as though they can't perform whereas previously they could perform, they could actually, they did have premises to give to the retailers. Now the retailers don't have a business and the landlord doesn't have a property to give to the retailer. What strategies would you employ?
Okay. So I think, the starting point, Maurice, is that business owners with the support of a restructuring expert must take a hard, cold look at what are the options before them. Okay. And if the situation is really at the deep end, then liquidation may be the only option that they have to consider. Okay. It's a reality. However, through the restructuring expert and support of management, if a plan can be developed, a rescue plan, that can make the business trade out of it, of course, with the support of the insurance companies, with the support of the landlords, etc., then, no questions, business rescue is the way to go. Okay. On the flip side of it, in terms of a strategy, a business may sit up and say, look, even with the support of the insurance, this is going to take 3 years to get ready. I can't continue in the format that I am. Okay. And in that case, the business person would need to make a decision as to, do I relocate? Do I start elsewhere? Okay. And through that process, effectively go through a business rescue process. Okay. But then the question would be, from the landlord's perspective, okay, so your lease is here for another 3 years. What are we going to do? Okay. So there would have to be a coming together of the minds between the various affected parties, meaning the creditors, employees, etc., including the landlords, to come to a solution that would be optimal for all parties concerned. Okay. But there's going to be casualties. Employees may lose the jobs, landlords may have to forego 3 years of a lease rental, etc. So effectively, I'm saying that there's no simple, clean-cut solutions to the problems at hand. Each case is on a case-by-case basis, and we'd have to work it through. Okay. Some companies are capable of diverting to online kind of business model, but yet others are not. Okay. The nature of the client base is such that people prefer to come into a shop, look at the product and buy. So these are the things that would have to be considered when all is said and done. But the client should use the maximum relief available to them in all contexts of the law and in all contexts of business operations for survival.
Sure, thanks for that. Moving over to Neil. Are there any instances where you believe some of the claims could in fact be repudiated? And please jump in, Andrew, if you want, on the basis of criminal activity as opposed to civil unrest. There is that distinction. So you had civil unrest, and then you got the opportunists who came in, and that's just criminal activity. What would happen in that case?
It's going to be very hard to differentiate between the two, because the looting happened, and within the looting, maybe criminal elements targeted ATMs and removed the cash. I think it's going to be very hard to say whether one person was an opportunist looter or was a part of a criminal gang, and to differentiate whether it was a separate event at the same place or part of one event is going to be very difficult to prove. And I think that's where.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
What I was asking is, if you were able to prove that it was not civil unrest and it was just criminal activity, what then?
Well, if Sasria rejected the claim saying it wasn't part of a riot or strike or looting, then you can either dispute it with Sasria, which will probably be the legal route, or you could look at your insurance policy to see if you have a theft limit, and if that theft limit would be adequate for the financial loss.
I think, Maurice, as Neil said at the start of all of this, your Sasria policy rides on the back of an existing commercial policy. So your first port of call, if Sasria says, look, this is not an insured event under our policy, then the logic says that, well, then in that case, it must be an insured event under my primary policy. Of course, that will always lead to a healthy debate between Sasria and the other insurance company as to who's actually responsible for the claim. So some of that stuff may end up in court if Sasria decides to take that route. Right now, they're not. But we don't know where that will end up. You know, whether they will say, look, at the end of it, we're not going to pay these claims because it was pure criminality. It wasn't actually riot or anything like that. That's yet to be explored. The other element you might get some claims rejected would be, sadly, in this country, we have a bit of a history and track record of fraudulent claims. Industry estimates sometimes as high as 40% of claims that are submitted are fraudulent. So there will be a sector of our community who see this as an opportunity now to get out of issues they may have. Never mind business rescue, their idea of business rescue may be to burn their premises down and claim from Sasria to get out of the financial hole they're in. So Sasria will have to look out for that kind of thing because it does occur. And that to me is probably the biggest risk or biggest area where you'll get claims rejections, is because it wasn't actually linked to this event or it was actually fraudulent to begin with.
Ryan, I have a question that's come through. Ryan, do you think that funders and lenders will look at these businesses differently given the current context? They've survived COVID, they were trading. Does this make them more likely to secure funding?
It's a good question. It's a question that I've got specifically throughout the COVID period. You know, and ultimately the strength of any business is tested in black swan events like this. So, I mean, I think if you're assessing a business or you run a business that was able to successfully negotiate COVID, and if you're in KZN, survive the unrest unscathed in somewhat of a good condition, I suppose that could be a testament to the entrepreneur and the business that they've built. But then again, you might get businesses that skated through by the skin of their teeth and on luck. So each case is different. We assess each business on its merit, similar to how Rajesh does it. So it's very a horses for courses type of answer, unfortunately.
Great. Okay. Into that. I have some legal questions that have come through. Dokoloko asks, can you sue the Minister of Police in instances where police were present but still allowed looting? The answer to the question, again, depends on the circumstances, because we've seen that in most of the videos, in fact, that I've seen, police were standing around and they were allowing the looting simply because they couldn't do anything about it, and they would have been foolish to get involved because they would have put themselves in harm's way. But if reasonably the police ought to have taken steps, then absolutely the same principles of yours versus the Minister of Police would apply to those circumstances. So if there is an omission and they had a legal duty and they ought to have fulfilled the duty, then the minister could be liable. A second question's come through from Jan. Thanks for your questions, Jan, today. Can claimants bring a class action against the state for derelict with SAPS did nothing of the looting? And if so, what would you advise? I don't think a class action would be appropriate because, as I said, it would be case specific. And I think in the majority of instances where the police were seen to be standing around, I think it was justifiable. They couldn't cope. They didn't have the riot gear. They didn't have the tear gas. And I think if one were to bring a claim, a class action, I don't think it would succeed. I wouldn't hedge my bets on that. I think that's pretty much brings us to a close. I don't know if there are any final comments that anybody wants to make. Other than that, so there any final?
Maurice?
Yeah.
Sorry, Maurice.
Yes, please ask questions. Final questions, please come through. Sorry about that, Rajesh. Carry on.
No, not at all, not at all. Thank you. Look, I think from a business person's perspective, you know, I don't think it is a situation where no matter how hard and tough it is, the approach should be one of surrender, you know, meaning just roll over and let everything happen as it would happen. No, the intention must be to fight with resolve, with steel, and to find ways of navigating through whatever you need to navigate through. There is professional help out there. Go out and get it, but have that mentality that says, what can I do to succeed? What can I do to save my business? Okay, that should be the mentality, and not one that says, you know, I can't cope anymore. That's it, I'm done. Thank you, Maurice.
Fantastic. Great parting words. Thank you to the panelists. Thanks to the audience. Thanks so much for being here today. I hope today was insightful. Please reach out to COBRA. COBRA is there to assist. We have mediators who can mediate with any third party that you may require assistance on. If you need us to negotiate, if you need us to meet with your staff, we do it. We do it on a shared value, gifted value basis. So please reach out, www.cobra.org.za. We're here to assist. Thanks again, everyone. Thanks, panelists. Until next time, cheers. Bye-bye.